Hey Axis and Allies players, the good captain here. Welcome to my 7th video in my Axis and Allies Classic series. Today we'll be going over Japan's Turn 1, or J1. I'll be doing Don's Essays version of events first, resetting the board, and then playing through my recommended course of action. So we have the board set up as if all the actions in Don's Essays have been taken by all the players, to include the reallocation of the British infantry from Africa to India, and this disposition of Russian forces in the north. Otherwise, this area of the board has, as of yet, remained untouched. So, Japan's Turn 1 build, according to Don's Essays, should be 2 transports and 3 infantry. 2 transports and 3 infantry. There's some variability here. The alternate build is 3 transports. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. But 2 transports and 3 infantry also happens to be my recommended build on the first turn. A lot of folks like to throw down an industry on the first turn. There's an argument for that, but Japan, as you can see, is highly concentrated in one area of the board, but also spread out in that a lot of these infantry are stuck out in garrison position on all these islands. And so having transports really turns Japan into this octopus that if you have the transports, if you have many transports, you're not just going to pick up these infantry and take them back to the main theater of operations, which is Asia, right? You could potentially use the fact that these infantry are out here and ready for local invasions. In other words, once you get enough transports, you could threaten Hawaiian Islands, New Zealand, Australia, Alaska, maybe even Mexico, or even the Western U.S., forcing the United States player to position infantry there very quickly and early in the game, potentially. So building a lot of transports kind of allows you to take advantage of a rather what otherwise might be considered difficult starting position. Like the British. I made that analogy that the British have an advantage and a disadvantage that's the same thing. Well, this is sort of the same situation. You have an advantage and a disadvantage depending on how you approach it. So anyway, I digress. Back to the purchase. So we're going to say that we built 2 transports and 3 infantry, and then we're going to move to the combat move. And the combat move in Don's Essays includes the movement of all naval forces that are able to, except for the transports, to attack the United States fleet around the Hawaiian Islands. So we're going to bring in our battleships, 1 aircraft carrier, 1 submarine, and the fighter that was on the aircraft carrier, as well as the fighter that was in the Philippines. For all of its movement, that one. Okay? The other combat move is going to be against the excuse me, I forgot. An industry is in India in this version of both versions. Industry's been built here, right? So, in Asia, the marching orders are to take one of these territories if it's empty. Otherwise, the priority on this turn is to attack China, the territory of China, with all 3 infantry from Manchuria, both infantry from Kwangtung, and 1 infantry from French Indochina Burma. And the reason we're leaving 1 behind is the adage that you never leave a territory completely unguarded. We don't want to just give the British that territory. At the very least, we're turning this into a dead zone that has to be taken with significant force. Okay? So we've got 6 infantry in here now. We're also going to commit all 3 fighters. 1 from Manchuria, 1 from French Indochina Burma, and 1 from Japan. and then of course the bomber. You can actually commit this bomber to the Pacific Fleet. In the SA state you should do that, so I'm a little sideways about doing that myself, but I'll wait till my side of the video. In this attack, the goal is to kill every American piece in the first round of combat. That's the goal. And with 3-4 attackers, 2-3 attackers, and then the submarine and aircraft carrier to boot, this isn't asking honestly for too much. It really isn't. And so it's not really a question of whether you're going to knock out all three, although sometimes it doesn't happen that way and it can lead to a frustrating situation. The question in this battle is, how much are the Japanese going to lose? They're definitely going to lose at least one piece, right? The question is whether that fighter, or whether that aircraft carrier and submarine get another hit between the two of them, right? So assuming the fighter hits, will the carrier or submarine also get a hit? And if they do, it can be difficult to allocate that casualty. Don's essays says he prefers losing the bomber, without really explaining in depth too much why that is. Says the fighters are more vital. I just want to demonstrate to you what the combat move is, okay? So that's happened. And then over here in China, you should get the 6th Infantry should produce a kill, and then the fighter group should produce 1 or 2 kills. So hopefully you knock out all 3 in the first round. However, there's it's not uncommon to have to go through a second round of combat, and at the end of that you'll have probably taken two casualties, something like that. So you'll generally have, and it could be better, it could be worse. Okay, you'll have something like this: 4 infantry stacked in China, and then the non-combat movement phase. This fighter lands on the aircraft carrier because it came from the Philippines and it has to. The bomber flies back to Japan, and then the transports here are going to go ahead and shuck some infantry into Manchuria. So we're going to move this guy up and bring 1 infantry off the Philippines. And then we're also going to pick up 1 from Japan with that same transport and dump him into Manchuria as well. And then the other transport will go to Okinawa and pick him up and bring him back and drop him off here, and also pick up 1 more infantry off of Japan and drop him off here as well. So these 2 transports have started stripping the islands of infantry and shucking infantry into you got 4 infantry in Manchuria, 4 infantry in China, and 1 down in French Indo. Now, that's pretty much it for the non-combat movement phase, other than these fighters, which should consolidate in Manchuria. Again, this is what the essays state, and so you've got these 4 infantry, 3 fighters, and everything kind of consolidated in Manchuria. And then when we place our units, I'm going to get some chips. Remember that we bought 2 transports and 3 infantry. 2 transports and 3 infantry. So the 3 infantry will stack on the remaining infantry in Japan, and those 2 transports will combine with the new 2 new purchases for a total of 4 transports here. And notice you'll have 1, 2, 3 transports worth of equipment, plus these a 4th transport's worth of equipment, or infantry I should say, from these islands. So in the future turn, what you should be doing is moving a transport to the Philippines and back again like we did before, picking up 1 more off of Japan and shucking them into Manchuria, as well as using a 2nd transport to move to Wake Island, move back to the Japan Sea Zone, pick up another infantry and shuck them over. So including these 2 infantry, we have 4 transports worth of material to shuck into Manchuria, which is what the essays state that you should do. And in future turns, you're going to be just building, like the turn 2 build, I think, is all, just build as many infantry as you can, right? Because you're going to collect 27 this turn, so you could build up to 9. or you could throw a tank in there too. It says if you want, or build a transport. And anyway, infantry and transports and armor, and it's all about getting troops across, turning this transport group into a land bridge, and getting troops and tanks and equipment across into Manchuria, rolling back Russia. Russia is a priority here too, and sort of bringing the hammer down on India in the longer run. It does recommend building an industry on around turn 3 in Manchuria, but not to do that until you've built up your transport fleet. Again, this provides you flexibility and options in terms of taking Hawaii and expanding throughout the rest of the Pacific, taking the Pacific Rim locations. And yeah, so that's basically it. And the long-term goal, the mid-game goal is to crush the British industry, crush and capture the British position here in India, and with the longer range goal of putting a heck of a lot of pressure on Russia and then into Africa in the long range goal. So this is the end of the Don's Essays version of events. I'm going to go ahead and reset the board, and then we'll go over my version of how to do Japan's turn 1. Okay, we've reset the board, and my purchases are the same as Don's Essays version. 2 transports and 3 infantry. I'm not as anti Japan building an industry on the first turn as he is. I think there's an argument for that. I'm not going to go into the details of that. It's not that interesting. I think there's a condition under which that's viable. But generally speaking, yes, two transports and 3 infantry is a safe bet, and we've kind of demonstrated that in the last video. And there's really no difference here. In fact, there's a lot of similarities between what Don's Essays say to do and what I do, including attacking Japan in much the same manner. However, one key difference is I add in the bomber. So we're hitting them hard here. This has the benefit of high potential of wiping out all 3 units on the first go, which means hopefully you'll only take 1, at most 2, on the return fire. So you'll have a more robust force, hopefully, remaining in China with this strategy, or with this take on it. And, infantry for the Japanese are going to be at such a premium, especially after they get deeper into Asia and the supply lines get longer. Even with 1 or 2 industries at your disposal, it's hard to, because you should eventually build an industry. I should say probably turn 2 or 3, the latest. Yeah, by turn 3 I like to build an industry as a mid-game goal there. But yeah, infantry are at a premium, so doing everything you can to kind of save your infantry is a good thing. And that's it. That's it for combat. And I know you're thinking, what the heck about the Pacific Fleet? But I don't attack them. What I do is consolidate the combined fleet in Japan. This and we shuck over the 4 infantry, right? So 1 each from one of the islands that we passed through. So we got 4 infantry there, like that. We'll probably have about 5 in Japan in China after it's all done there. Maybe 4 if we weren't so lucky. And then I consolidate the air fleet back into the Japanese waters as well. The fighters in Manchuria, or I can keep them safe in Kwangtung. Just wherever they're safest are going to be the most benefit. I didn't attack the American Pacific Fleet, right? So why? Well, it's part of the overall strategy in my technique. Remember that we allowed the bulk of the Allied Navy here. We sank all the loose British ships, the transport, the battleship, and the submarine. However, we left the bulk of the Allied fleet up here untouched. We are, again, ceding the Atlantic to the Allies. And in return, what we got to do is keep all of our fighters, a heavier investment, more bold investment, as the Germans in Africa. And as the Japanese, we're not risking, we're pretty much doing the same theme here. We are retaining our submarine and potentially one of our fighters by not attacking that Pacific Fleet. Again, you'll lose one, and you might lose 2 units as the Japanese. What are the Americans going to lose? Basically the same thing plus an aircraft carrier. So the question is, how much do you really want to kill that aircraft carrier? And given that the British are already, and the Russians already have some soak units and a battleship over here, what's the point of sinking this? There's not really. It's much over muchness. The Allies have the Atlantic, okay? And I should stop this and say the more experienced players, and we'll cover this in America's turn as well, more experienced players will retrograde their fleet to the Panama Canal on America's turn 1. They'll consolidate them down there, and then on turn 2, put them east of the United States, and this is to help the shuck strategy overall against Germany. So that's why I'm talking like people are just axiomatically going to do this. They might not, but if they do, this setup, if they do not, I should say, this setup as the Japanese player is the most deterrent to them doing that. If they stay in the Pacific, even if they consolidate their fleet, we now have an incredible amount of air power at our disposal, especially if the fighters are here. This, I feel, is a safe bet, preserves your fleet for use later in the game, rather than losing units that you're probably not going to replace, like the submarine and a fighter, if you had attacked in the Hawaiian Islands sea zone. If the Americans depart, you immediately start the Pacific Rim tour. You just hit Hawaii, because remember, you bought 2 transports, so you'll have a total of 4. One should go to Hawaii. You can take the battleships with you, and then you can roll it down here on turn 3. And hopefully you can take both of these on turn 3. And then from this sea zone on turn 4, you can be at India. So it's like a tour. It's like a band on tour. You go to Hawaii, and then you're doing Australia, New Zealand, and then you're doing India, and then from India, anywhere you want in Africa. Just so long as the Americans, stay quiet out here. And if they kick, if they build some ships out there, hey, that's awesome. Like, if America's investing in the Pacific and I'm the Japanese, I'm so happy. You can, worst case scenario, match them ship for ship and just kind of stalemate them. But, that's a good thing if they're not focusing on Germany. There's just not a lot of IPCs out here for them to be focusing on. So, thank you for watching this. All the best from the good captain, and bye-bye.